The Home Tech Podcast is supported by listeners like you. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support. Hey everyone, welcome to the Home Tech Podcast for Friday, June 8, 2018. I'm Seth Johnson, flying solo here tonight. Jason Griffin is on a much needed vacation. I think this week he's actually in Boston, and then I think he said next week he's on vacation. But anyway, he's on vacation from the show. And so I'm going to take it solo here. Actually, I'm going to take that back. I'm not completely solo because this week is, of course, WWDC, the big Apple developer conference in San Jose. And I've got a very good friend of the show, Adam Justice, to come in and talk a little bit about what he has seen. He's actually at the show, and I got him to come in and just chat with us a little bit about what he's seen at the show, what he thought was really neat, what kind of like the word on the street is, what people are talking about at WWDC. So look forward to that in the interview. But right now, let's go ahead and just jump into some home tech headlines. Big news out of Sonos this week. At their June 6 event in San Francisco, Sonos launched a new smart soundbar they call the Sonos Beam. The speaker is much smaller than the 5-year-old Playbar, and it features an HDMI input for the audio return channel, or ARC, feature of most modern TVs. To set this up, you just simply plug the Beam into the ARC HDMI input of your TV, and the TV will recognize that it's a soundbar and send audio over the HDMI cable. If your TV doesn't have an ARC input, Sonos will also be shipping an optical converter dongle thing along with the Beam. So that's kind of nice. At around 26 inches long in length, the Beam is pretty small, and it's compact, but it can be paired with other Sonos speakers to make a complete surround system. Unfortunately, there's no Dolby Atmos support or the ability to configure it into like a more advanced surround system like 7.1 or much larger, which would be nice. I wish they'd do that in the future. The Beam is also the company's second speaker to get full Alexa integration, and adding an Amazon streaming device like a stick to your setup enables voice control for Amazon-enabled streaming services, which is pretty nice. Google Assistant integration has been promised again, but no official release date on that was announced. The Beam ships July 17 for a price of $399 and comes in black or white. Sonos also officially confirmed that support for Apple's AirPlay 2 streaming audio protocol will arrive by the way of a free software update in July. This new feature is, of course, limited to Sonos One, the Play 5, and the Play Base, or in other words, every Sonos device I don't own. AirPlay 2 will also be on the Sonos Beam. And that's pretty much it for the news this week. With WWDC going on, we got the Sonos event, and we got Infocom kind of getting underway. There's going to be a lot more to kind of talk about next week. But the WWDC conversation and HomeKit conversation, we're going to have that with Adam Justice here in kind of a short interview. Adam is there at WWDC for his company ConnectSense, and he's a pretty good, insightful guy to know and talk to about HomeKit because of what his company does. So let's go ahead and get right into the interview and talk with Adam. Hey, Adam, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Seth. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So you are there with a company called ConnectSense. And I guess just go ahead and give us a little background of what ConnectSense does.
Sure. So yeah, I'm the CEO of ConnectSense, and we've been our parent company GridConnect's been in the networking space for 13 years now, and the ConnectSense side came into play about 5 or 6 years ago. We actually built our first connected product, which was a set of connected sensors. From there, we went on to build one of the first HomeKit products, which was a connected smart outlet.
Yep.
And then today we also work with companies large and small to help them bring connected products to market as well. So we work with companies like Moen, Schlage Locks, and some other folks as well. And we have some stuff in the hopper that's pretty exciting as well. So we're also helping those kind of companies take their vision for connected products and get it out there.
Right. Like companies that may have an expertise in building locks or garage door openers, but they don't have an expertise in developing apps and integrating small integrated circuits for IoT devices, right?
Right. Yeah. So we have as part of developing some of our own stuff, we built a full end-to-end team where we can do hardware design and firmware and cloud and apps and kind of everything you need manufacturing, everything you need to get a connected device out there. So, so for people that, just know their domain, for example, we worked with a company, Wayne Water, that builds sump pumps. They know how to build sump pumps, but they don't know how to do, IoT connectivity. So we were able to do all that for them and help them get a connected sump pump to market. So yeah, so we're doing a lot of stuff in that space as well as doing our own products. So we're pretty unique in that we kind of sit in both camps, and so we sit in our customers' place as well and know what it takes to get a product to market, and then we can help them do that too.
Very, very interesting. Sounds like a cool place to be. So you've been in San Jose for the past couple of days here for Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference. Going into the sessions, were you at the keynote this year, or did you watch remotely?
I was, yeah. I got in line very early in the morning, but I have the advantage to I live in Chicago, so keynote happens on day one. Haven't fully adjusted to West Coast time yet, so wake up at my natural time, which ends up being at silly o'clock in the morning out here, and then just go get in line. And so yeah, it's always fun and exciting to get to go watch an Apple keynote live and be around the space. And it's a cool event, and I've been lucky enough that I've been able to go the last 4 years. As we've been working closely with Apple on HomeKit stuff, so it's definitely one of my favorite weeks of the year.
Very nice. And we're going to touch on a couple of things here, but any like big takeaways that you're excited about that came from the keynote there?
I think the biggest one that I think a lot of people are talking about after the keynote. I think in general it's a lot of little improvements, but the biggest thing that there's buzz, in the streets of San Jose is around the whole Siri shortcuts thing. I think they've pretty broadly opened up support for Siri,
right?
And yeah, that people are definitely excited to integrate that in their apps.
Yep, that seems like one of the bigger features. It's kind of like a generic entry into using Siri. You can basically make a little tag that says, turn on the lights or something, or heck, anything, call this person, and it would trigger some kind of automation within the phone to make that happen. And it's up to app developers to integrate with that new API that Apple's putting out. Is that right?
Yeah, I watched the session on that yesterday, and yeah, basically you're going to call out a function of your app to do one certain thing and basically expose that to Siri. So I think at least some folks may find it pretty simplistic in what you can do with it. It's not super duper complex, but I think it's going to enable some really powerful interactions. But, I think the thing that I was talking with some other folks around here about, and what I think we're realizing is it's not a full-on like bypass of what you can do with HomeKit. That's always going to be a more powerful experience that gives you, full, Siri utterances and powerful automation stuff. So there might be some weird ways that people try to like side around HomeKit to do one or two different things, but like I wouldn't view this as a way that all of a sudden, there's going to be another path to home automation with Apple. Like I think that path is still going to be through HomeKit. This is just going to broadly open up other things that you're going to be able to do through other apps. And I think the cool piece of that, when it comes, HomeKit is a piece of that story. I have the beta on my iPad yet, but the Shortcuts app isn't in there fully yet. So I can't actually play with the HomeKit piece, but from what I understand, you'll be able to integrate it with scenes you've set up in HomeKit. So, so there will be a way to tie together, multiple things that you want to do with a simple Siri command. And that can include, scenes that you've set up in HomeKit. So I think that will add a broader world and definitely some cool things that people are going to want to do, incorporating that. So I think that's going to be cool. And hopefully they add it in one of the later betas and I can dig in and start to play with it. But we won't truly be able to play with it until the fall when there are more apps and stuff that you can play around with.
Right. We've talked about, we'll probably talk about this a little bit more later on, but it's such a generic way to integrate with Siri, and then putting it into, I guess there's this app that you're talking about is kind of the workflow 2.0, like the workflow team. There's an app that you can do all sorts of crazy automations on the iPhone with, that so many people were really loving and using. I personally, I never got into it that much, but I kind of used it to make like funny images or of something. I can't really remember what it was, but like I could make quote images or fake Twitter account images and that kind of thing with it. And I really haven't used it very much since then, but I know a lot of people were really basing their entire workflow, if you will, around that one app on maybe an iPad or an iPhone, to get them to create documents and set up a document a particular way and grab whatever's on the clipboard and paste it into that document and then send that out as a text message or something. There's all sorts of crazy things you can do, and it sounds like that has been just completely extended using these Siri, this new Siri API. And integrations in so much that, like what you were saying, the automation can still take place. And not only can you maybe trigger the lights to turn on in one room, but you'd also be able to do multiple things within that automation. That's what it sounded like to me. Like there's more than one thing that you could do based on a custom keyword that you give Siri to handle.
Right. Yeah. You could send somebody a text message or, just kind of, I don't know, anything you can think of. And they actually talked about that in the keynote and used a HomeKit example of setting the thermostat as part of that. So yeah, that's definitely cool. And yeah, for those that aren't familiar, Apple bought this company Workflow, I think 2 years ago.
Yep.
And I actually met one of the engineers there last year at this event. And he told me that they worked on the Siri team. And I was like, that's interesting. And then obviously the reveal being this year of, the Siri shortcut stuff, is like, oh, that all makes sense now.
Yeah. And when we're talking about a company the size of Apple and even Google, when you say team, it's more like an entire company or division within Apple itself, right? So, I mean, we may mention the team one more time tonight, and it's almost means like it's almost like a silo. Like they don't really communicate or work with other. They will in the broader like scope of things, but they'll develop and hire their own people to do their own work internally, and then that may be realized at the top level to other parts of the company, like integrating this Siri API. Obviously, the Siri team put it together, and it becomes available to not only developers, but also becomes to other apps within the Apple ecosystem, like the people that are working on the apps that do like iWorks app, like the Pages and that kind of thing. Like these teams are massive. The company's massive. The teams are small and built up inside of them, but they're almost like little tiny companies that do their own thing within Apple themselves. So just kind of wanted to kind of put that out there because I know we're going to say that word one more time, and it's kind of makes more sense that when you see Apple doing things in a broader sense, to kind of remember that they're still working with these little smaller teams within the company to get stuff done. So let's talk about a little bit of thing. Let's talk about a little couple of other things that came up during the keynote that I thought were pretty big, especially around the home automation and home entertainment area. Apple TV seems to be getting better. The presentation was very end user focused. It wasn't so much for the developers. I didn't really get much out of it, like with a developer hat on. I didn't hear very much there, like new APIs or anything that's coming to the Apple TV. But one big thing they did get was Dolby Atmos, which is the newer surround sound hotness, I guess, if you will. Like this is what all the Blu-rays and movies would come with if you went out and bought a hard copy of Blu-ray. Gives you more speakers, channels of music or dedicated channels of music within the system. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that a Dolby Atmos receiver would do to give you movie quality sound in your home. And Apple TV is kind of upgrading all of their content, or the qualified content that would have that anyway, later on this year at no cost. Like if you have purchased a 4K Apple TV movie and you want to get a Dolby Atmos sound, you can do that now, or you will be able to do that soon with this what seems to be a software upgrade from Apple TV into your stereo or to your home theater system.
Yeah, they did this when they announced the Apple TV 4K, and I was somebody who went all in on Apple TV and digital movies a couple of years back. So they basically, when the 4K version came out, they said, if you've already bought these movies, boom, you get them in 4K. So I was super happy as a user, that they did that. And, they're kind of doubling down on this further. So I think the message here is, that, if you buy stuff in our ecosystem, like it's, I don't know about future proof. Yeah, it pays off and long term. So the funny story about this Dolby Atmos announcement was our mutual friend Richard Gunther has a Dolby Atmos theater in his house, and I knew that he would be excited about this. So I texted him, and because I was sitting in the audience, I think we were maybe a minute ahead of the stream. So he hadn't seen that news yet. So I texted him, I was like, Dolby Atmos! ! And he's like, spoilers, they're not there yet, but yes. So that was pretty funny to get Richard's spoiler horn there. So
that's pretty good. Yeah, I've noticed a number of times, like even when I'm online chatting with people, and I'm looking on Twitter and watching the live stuff go by. People who are there would typically announce stuff a little bit earlier before whatever buffering or whatever comes through on the live stream. It's gotten better over the years, but it's still a decent amount of time. Another thing that the Apple TV is doing is they're teaming up with more cable companies and content providers, doing some really cool things. They have this really funny picture of an older cable box. It's the 8300 HD for those here in the States, and who have unfortunately had had to run across one of these in the wild and actually use them. They weren't the best boxes in the world, but I've got a funny picture I'll put in the show notes of them pointing out that cable box with the brand name scrubbed off of it. Apple TV is Apple seems like they're trying to get the Apple TV to become the cable box of the future, where if you order cable from Comcast or I think they announced maybe Spectrum would be doing this first. When you want to watch cable TV, you just launch an app on the Apple TV and it loads up your content on there and live TV. I think that's great. It sounds like if you're all in, like you said, if you're going all in with an Apple TV, this is just kind of one of those added bonuses that you'd get, that you don't have to have a big ugly cable box sitting there and burning up inside your cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, I think they see what's coming here. People are cutting the cord, and they want to be the go-to device for that era. We're at a point of change here, and so they're trying to be geared up to be that spot in your home theater, what you go through. So I don't know, that as a family, we just did this in the last year, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Yep, I'm kind of in that same boat. We'll eventually get Jason on board, but I don't know. The sports are strong with him, so it's going to be hard to get him off that. And another feature that they're rolling out with some cable providers is called Zero Sign-On. They made kind of a big deal about this. In the past, they did like a single sign-on where you'd sign on once within like some settings on your phone or within the Apple TV itself. And whenever you downloaded a new app for content, like say you went to the CW app or whatever, it would, when you launch that network app, it would automatically sign you in. And now they're just using kind of this feature. My cable provider has this. Comcast has this already. Like if I go to Xfinity.com, it realizes that I'm on my Comcast network. It realizes, I've been there before and paid paid the bill before, and it figures out, hey, Seth Johnson's here. Let's just go ahead and log him right on in. And if he wants to go pay his bill and pay us money, that's fine too. So the zero sign-on thing, I've seen it on the web. I know it already exists. They know your IP. They know everything about you. They know the MAC address of your modem. And if data is coming from that and it's an Apple TV trying to log into an app, yeah, just go ahead and let it sign in. And I think from a headache perspective, I think this is a great feature and integration that it's been needed for a while, I guess. A little bit easier.
So why I'm not excited about this is I think it was
I know why I'm not excited too.
Yeah. So last year they announced single sign-on, and it sounded like the best thing since sliced bread. And it's still not fully rolled out. And even before I cut the cord, like it wasn't like I had Comcast before, and like it wasn't fully supported. And this isn't an Apple problem. This is a cable holding on for dear life problem. And so, they're trying to drag this industry along, and they're just fighting tooth and nail to not lose their grip on the industry. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. This doesn't help me because my current situation, I have Comcast for internet, and I'm using DirecTV Now for streaming. So I'm not getting zero sign on, but maybe this is their way of appeasing the providers of, well, if you stick all with Comcast, then we can give you this feature or whatever. So
right.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, it's kind of how I feel about it too. I also sneakily sign into a couple of my sister-in-laws, or maybe some other relatives apps that or logins on a couple of apps just to get a couple of shows that I may want to see, and that would go away. That's what I guess I can't be too happy about that, but I guess I probably should pay for what I'm watching. But oh well. Then one of the next big one of the next big features or slides, it was probably about all of 10 seconds that they had the slide on screen. But they talked a little bit about control integration. I'm going to read what the presenters said there, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. First off, the slide had Crestron logo, a Savant logo, and a Control 4 logo right on the big screen, which I thought was great. And they said, this is what she said: for those that have an installed home control system, we're working with leading providers so that you can use their remotes to control Apple TV, even including support for Siri. That is a very interesting couple of things. First off, the control side of things. Right now, I know that Control 4 and possibly Crestron and Savant are using the iTunes, like the backwards reverse engineered iTunes API thing, to be able to control an Apple TV. That's unsupported, unofficial APIs are never a good thing for a company to be shipping product with. So it's good that Apple is saying, yes, we need an IP based control for the Apple TV. We're going to work with people that know a little bit, something about IP based controls like Control 4, Savant, and Crestron. I couldn't think of three better companies to work with. Maybe Logitech, but I'm happy to see that. But the last part of that sentence really threw me for a loop, because it was there was like a little pause, and she said even including support for Siri, and that really just there's a number of ways that could happen, and we can kind of walk through a few of those ways. But man, that really threw me for a loop.
Yeah, I mean, I think just based on my experience of working with Apple and things like that, which I can't get into super details on, but how I would color this as what this is basically what you can do with the Apple TV remote, you're going to be able to do with your Crestron Control 4 or Savant remote. This is not like all of a sudden a backdoor way to get into HomeKit or, control a bunch of different devices. What I interpreted this is as, we want you to be able to control the Apple TV. And if you're all in on one of these major ecosystems, then we want you to be able to control the Apple TV with those remotes, including using the Siri function like you would on an Apple TV remote.
That makes that makes a lot of sense. That to me means that there is some kind of, or there will be, or some kind of API developed between the Apple TV and a controller system that somehow communicates the words that come off of a remote to the Apple TV, and the Apple TV can take that and convert it into Siri language and do its own thing. 2 out of those 3 companies actually have remotes with microphones on them, Crestron and Savant. Control 4 does not, so that means there could be an updated Control 4 remote. I don't know how they would do. Control 4 remotes are all Zigbee, so I don't know that how they would do voice over Zigbee. It would have to be a different. I'm sure it'd have to be a different technology, or somehow process the voice on the remote. I don't know how this is going to work. So this is kind of an interesting thing for them to say. Crestron or I've seen a couple of reports out there that said Crestron was going to integrate their TSR 310. I think that's their new remote, which has got a lot of good press on that remote. But I went through the spec sheet on the TSR 310, and it does have an integrated remote into it. Integrated microphone in it, and I was kind of surprised to see that. So it looks like this can be done, and if it gets gets rid of having to use the Apple TV remote, which is quite possibly the world's worst remote, and enables me to use something that I can control the rest of my home system with, or the rest of my home theater system with, that'd be great. But one of the companies I saw missing on that page was Logitech. And I mean, if I think of consumer home control, there's really no other brand. And I was really shocked. One, I was shocked to see Crestron, Control 4, and Savant up there, but I was even more shocked to see Logitech was missing. So not sure what that says. That's an interesting omission.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they want to figure it out with these guys first, and then they'll work with Logitech. I mean, Apple and Logitech work pretty closely together on stuff all the time. You know, they've given them first party access to do, keyboards, cases, and a bunch of iPad stuff. So I can imagine it's probably something that there's at least discussions about. But yeah, I'm a big Harmony remote guy myself, so I would love to see that. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been meaning to. It's been a while. Like people have been trying to trick me into going back and getting a Logitech remote. And does it have a microphone on it, or would they need to ship something else along with that?
Yeah, the current ones don't have a mic on it, but I don't know. I'm not somebody that is super jazzed about that, but yeah, I know there are people that love it. Right.
Well, will be interesting to see what comes out of that. When I first heard it, I thought, well, okay, we've already heard about the Siri app shortcuts, and maybe the integrations with the companies like Control 4, Crestron, and Savant would be using those Siri app shortcuts basically through the automation on the phone to trigger automation within those companies' apps. But it as more and more kind of like falls out about this, it sounds like what you thought is the more correct way of thinking of it is that there may be a way that Apple work closely with these 3 companies, and there may be a way that we get some kind of voice API into maybe not we, but like in the big sense, but somebody gets a voice API into the Apple TV where you can talk to your remote, and it gets normalized and sent down to the Apple TV, which I think that's great. I really do. The more people that kind of like talk to each other and seeing like these 3 companies and then the biggest company in the world talk to them, that's great. So I'm all for this. More integration.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the new features that came to iOS 12. There's performance increases, which sounded pretty good, and not really things that we would need to talk about on this podcast in particular. I'm sure they'll be covered in depth everywhere else. Lots of like AR and machine learning updates and demos that we saw on stage there. Some of the things I thought were pretty neat are the notification and time management improvements. Not sure how that kind of plays into like home automation, but I did see briefly see a a session today about having more rich notifications, like where you could actually send back a response through the notifications. And they were doing basic things like order this food, and you would click yes or no on the notification itself. So kind of taking that and thinking about like maybe if you had a device and an app on the phone, and the device needed to know something from maybe like a gate. Let's leave like a gate. If the gate, do you want to open or close the gate, or let this person in? You click yes, and it would send that back through the notification. I'm sure we'll see what developers can do with this kind of thing in the future, but I thought that was that part was pretty cool. That we were getting a little bit better notification layouts, I guess. The other thing that I think we talked on a little bit about here is the Siri app shortcuts, and you've been saying this is not really a run around, an in run on HomeKit. Like this is something that will augment HomeKit and home automation devices. One thing that you kind of were leading down in conversation earlier was that this could be a way to trigger devices that aren't HomeKit compatible. Do you see that happening?
There may be a very limited way that you could do that, but basically, it's going to be. I don't see it as being a powerful or really good experience for the end customer. Per se. Like if you can imagine, like I have to go build a scene in HomeKit, do everything I want to do, and then I have to build it, basically bolt on this one extra piece. So I think we'll see what people do with it, but I think once people get the sense of what's possible here, they'll probably see that this is not the way to, get the full breadth of Siri compatibility that you would get on HomeKit.
That makes sense. Yeah. You would have to program it, and like you said, program and do the configurations in two different places, and then just kind of use this app shortcut to bridge them together. So yeah, I get how that's working now. That makes more sense. With Siri app shortcuts, do you see anything else that may be on the horizon for Apple in the future with this, or is this kind of like, do you see them refining this, or do you see this kind of like being the generic way into Siri that, I mean, quite frankly, a lot of developers have been asking for a while.
Right.
Where if you didn't have the intent that Siri would let you do, like make a shopping list or reminders or that kind of thing, like there really wasn't a way to integrate with Siri.
Right.
But do you see them refining this later on?
Yeah. I mean, I think, this is how technology works. I think as consumers, we always want things to take a huge leap forward, and that's not how things work. Like you put something out there, you refine it, you add to it, things like that. So, that's what I see this as. They're opening the doors a little bit, and they're going to see what people do with it and see what people are asking for more and things like that. And then they'll, kind of adjust from there. So yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some incredibly cool and powerful things to be able to do with this, but it's probably going to have its limitations initially. And, within the next couple of years, I'm sure they'll enhance the capabilities. So yeah, I definitely, it's one of the things I walked out of the show of, most excited about.
Very cool. And the last bullet point, I guess we have on our list here is HomeKit itself. No major announcements this year that I saw. The keynote time, I mean, it was about 10 seconds of the keynote where they actually dedicated to saying anything about HomeKit specifically. But one big thing that did come out of this is that as part of this new way of moving iOS apps over to the Mac, one of the apps that they will be doing that first with is the Home app that exists on iPad and iPhone. That's getting ported over to the Mac, and I guess it's already there in the betas.
Yeah, I wouldn't know because I would never dare put a beta on my Mac. But yeah, I think this is a cool one, and for those who don't listen to my show, which I'll give the plug later, but we did a prediction show, and this was one of Richard's predictions and something he wanted. So yeah, I think a lot of people wanted to see a home app coming to the Mac, just for ease of control. I think also for setting up more complex automations, it'll be nice to have it on your Mac and things like that. So I think it's great to see it there. And and as you said, I no major, HomeKit announcements this year. I think that doesn't mean that, they're slowing down on HomeKit stuff. It's just, not a lot made it into this release, but, I think the HomeKit's ecosystem is still strong and growing. And actually, I think they did a lot last year, and things like software auth and things like that. And, HomeKit is only as good as what manufacturers like us and the companies we work with can do to bring into the ecosystem. So Apple fed us a lot last year in new capabilities. And then, everybody's like, it thinks that companies are going to turn around and implement that overnight. That stuff takes time. There's a lot of people involved in the process. You got to get your devices certified, things like that. And so I think people are still, catching up to what they announced last year, let alone, having time for new stuff too. So,
And the reason we're kind of not saying too much on this is because the deep dive session into HomeKit, the actual session is Friday, and we're recording this on Wednesday. So it'll be a couple more days before we actually know if there's any, there could be any like improvements into the software. Like last year, I think they had kind of like a, what is it? Not a proximity, but an API that was based on occupancy that made it in there. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that was, I think that was last year, if not the year before, but like they didn't talk about that on the stage, but that was in the session. And that's a really, really cool feature that they really worked on. And they can go back and they can improve that. And like you said, add automation integrations with the Mac based home app, and do a bunch more stuff that way too. So it's not a platform that is standing still by any means each year. And I think we got a little bit, to me, taking a step back, I think we got a little bit more out of HomeKit this year than we have in the past, if not by name, by just integrations with the Apple ecosystem itself, right? And this is what excited me about HomeKit from the very beginning, was that you're taking a home automation controller and putting it on an iPhone and kind of building it in a very unique way. And then basically over time, they have been enabling different aspects of the OS to control and talk to HomeKit. And I think having the Siri app shortcuts and the ability to maybe kind of trigger HomeKit scenes, and that's going to be very, very powerful in the future. And I think that we'll probably see some revisions to it. I know we'll see revisions to it and iterations on this in the future, to where you'll be able to trigger HomeKit in ways that we're not even thinking about today.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed.
Well, Adam, thanks so much for joining us here on the show. This, you kind of alluded to it, but I want you to go ahead and plug the podcast that you do, the Connected Home Show, which is an excellent podcast. I'm sure that if you haven't heard of it, go download it right now, because it's really good. But if you can tell people how they can get in touch with you or listen to that show, that'd be great.
Sure. So yeah, you can find the Connected Home Show in your favorite podcast app, or at connectedhome.fm, or follow me on Twitter at Adam Justice.
Excellent. Well, Adam, have fun out there in California, and we'll look forward to having you back on the show and talking a little bit more about ConnectSense and HomeKit in the future.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Seth.
And once again, I'd like to thank Adam Justice of ConnectSense and the Connected Home Show. You can listen to that episode he was talking about over at connectedhome.fm, where he and Richard sit down and have a HomeKit 2018 HomeKit draft. That's a really good one. And I know for a fact there's going to be a follow-up episode to that. So check that out, connectedhome.fm. Adam, thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule there in San Jose and talking with us here in HomeTech. All the links and topics we discussed tonight can be found on our show notes at HomeTech.fm/214. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter, which includes even further analysis as well as other industry news that may not have made the show. Again, the link is HomeTech.fm/214. I'm going to go ahead and skip the mailbag and pick of the week this week. I know we've got a couple of things to follow up on, but this was kind of just a quick episode that I was able to get done only because Adam was able to take time out and help out. So I do want to thank him at least one more time before the show ends here. If you have any feedback, comments, suggestions, or picks of the week you'd like to submit, go ahead and send them over to our email address at feedback@hometech.fm or visit hometech.fm/feedback and you can fill out the online form. We want to give a big thank you for everyone who supports the show, but especially those who are able to financially support us through our Patreon page. If you don't know about our Patreon page, head on over to hometech.fm/support to learn how you can support HomeTech for as little as $1 a month. Any pledge over $5 a month gets you a shout out on the show, but every single pledge gets an invite to our private Slack channel where you and other supporters of the show gather every day for inside baseball conversations about home technology. Once again, that link is hometech.fm/support. On next week's show, I know we'll have another project lined up, so that should be fun to take a listen to. And we'll have all the news that happens in between now and then. So have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.